Hi friends, in this video we are going to study identifying the construction project stakeholders and its types. We will study about the various levels of stakeholder management and the power interest matrix. Stakeholders in construction. If we begin to list the main stakeholders in any construction project, the list will often be very large and will typically include the following: the owners, the customers or the users of the facility, the project managers, facility managers, designers, architect, shareholders, legal authorities, employees of the company, subcontractors, suppliers, process and service providers, the bank, the insurance company, there will be media, neighbors, general public, government establishments, visitors to the facility, the natural environment, the press, and civic institutions, etc., and so on and so forth. However, such a huge list of stakeholders simply cannot be compiled in a correct way until and unless we identify a way to classify these into broad categories. Hence, the most accepted type of classification is internal and external stakeholders. In our previous lecture, we had studied about direct, indirect, primary, and secondary stakeholders as well. So, for internal stakeholders, the main examples that have been shown are the clients, the project professionals or the in house employees, and the contractors and suppliers that are appointed by the company. Thus, if I am a construction contracting company, the internal stakeholders will be my private clients or public clients, my architect, the quantity surveyor, structural engineer, service engineers, and other consultants who are appointed for various surveys, design development, cost control, etc. Also, the main contractors, subcontractors, laborers, and suppliers will be considered as imperative to the project. So, the basic definition of the internal stakeholders itself was that these people can get directly affected or their absence can directly impact the project. The client here is responsible for the overall support to the organization, to the project. It is the link between all the consultants, the contractors. He's the one who will provide financial support and get the maximum return on the risk involved. Whereas public clients would allocate funds to project and be the link here also and ensure that the project is completed successfully in terms of time, cost, and quality. While project professionals like the architect will be involved in the project from initial phase and will produce drawings. The quantity surveyor will advise the client on financial budgets, on tender documents, contracts, valuation and measurements, etc. A structural engineer will do the structural calculations and ensure statutory compliance, where several other consultants which are taken on board for energy compliance, for cost management, for valuations, etc., will do that job to ensure the project is carried out successfully throughout its life cycle. Subcontractors, the laborers, carry out work on the ground. They are the main person who actually finish the task assigned. Whereas suppliers for materials, machinery, etc., are the ones who supply and install as well as commission them in the building. Moving further to external stakeholders. External stakeholders can also be called as the secondary stakeholders whose direct involvement is not there. However, they can influence the outcome of the project or get influenced. These can be divided into two parts, that is external public parties and external private parties. The most common example as external public party is the government authority. The government authorities ensure that the project abides by all laws and regulations and also complies with the planning codes. Different town planning bodies, such as specific to locations like Delhi, there will be the Delhi Development Authority, etc., who will ensure that the project is in line with the district planning and complies to the community requirements. General public is also an external public party who usually participate and contribute to the government process of a society as a whole, whereas media will influence the project decisions by their various coverage. Also, there are institutional forces or nationalized industries. These will put an influence upon the activities of the members through rules of conduct, education, conditions of engagement, and fee scales. Also, there are labor unions or employers association. External private parties related to the project would comprise of local landowner, that is, from whom you purchase the land. The local residents or the community staying around the project may be affected by the project and may raise concern or may even benefit. Also, there are environmentalists, conservationists of various NGOs which might take interest or get affected if the project damages the environment or there is pollution. There are competitors, there are tourists, the visitors to the project if it is a massive infrastructure or historical importance project. For example, while construction of the Statue of Unity, there were several site visits conducted by tourists and educational institutes. Also, there are other parties who might not be immediately clear to the project, but during its operation may be come across. So now that we have listed so many different types of stakeholders into two broad categories of internal and external, how do we understand who is important, who should be given the priority, who will first influence the project or is interested mainly in the project? If a project manager knows to properly prioritize his focus on the important stakeholders, automatically the project will come out as a success. Thus, a table has been proposed to show the six directions of influence of a stakeholders, that is upward, downward, outward, sideward, internal and external. Upward influence means the senior management, that is in the line of your chain of a project manager. It will be the project sponsor, the senior executives, and those who represent the organizational commitment. Downward will be the employees, his project team working, whereas outwards it will be the customers, the various suppliers, shareholders. In a sideward direction, if the project manager sees, he will see he has his other peers, other project managers working on projects with whom he can collaborate, learn. Also, there is internal. direction of influence, that is, the stakeholders within the organization and external stakeholders outside the organization. This entire table can be summed up into this diagram, which shows all the directions of influence with respect to the project. The upward, that is managing sponsors, outward, managing customers, joint venture partners, and the public. Downward is managing your team, while as sideward is competition and relationship with peers and communities. These relationships are all bidirectional, that is, they all can impact or get impacted by the project. The next method to understand who is important on the priority list is through rating their power and proximity. Power means importance given to that stakeholder, and proximity is the interest the stakeholder has in the project. The power is low if the stakeholder has very low level of power, that is, cannot cause any much change. It can be significant in formal capacity. The stakeholder might have some formal capacity or can have a high capacity to formally instruct change. Whereas the proximity tells that the stakeholder can relatively remotely work and does not have any direct involvement with the project processes. He may be detached or can get routinely involved or can be directly involved in the project. Thus, considering the low and high proximity and power, the power interest matrix, which is a very commonly used tool to map the important stakeholders, is formed. On the x-axis, we have interest, whereas on the y-axis, we have power. The person with low power and low interest, we have to keep an eye on these stakeholders and act when they are prompted. The example of such stakeholders would be the general public, whereas the stakeholders who have high interest and high power in the project can be your clients who need to be managed very closely and directly because it is their project and they have high power, that is the power of funding the project. Then there are stakeholders who have high power but low interest. You need to maintain these stakeholders in a happy state. For example, it is the government authorities. They have extremely high power to stop any project. However, they directly don't get involved or take interest into any construction projects. Also, there are certain group of stakeholders who have high interest, however low power in making or breaking the project. These can be your customers. You need to keep these stakeholders happy as well as constantly informed. This brings us to another classification of importance mapping of stakeholders by the rating the urgency. Urgency can be through means of value, that is, how much stake does the person have in the work or its outcomes, or its action, that is, a measure of the likelihood that the stakeholder will take action, positive or negative, to influence the work and its outcomes. This is again divided into 5 levels from very low to very high. A person with very low value has limited or no stake in the work's outcome, whereas if he has very high value, his direct concern is with the success or even cancellation of the project. Action. With very low action, it is unlikely that the person will attempt to influence the work. In medium, he may be prepared to make an effort to either influence the work positively or negatively. In very high action, they may be self activated and will go almost to any length to influence the work. This classification is shown in the power interest importance influence matrix. Power is importance and interest is influence. Thus, by understanding this concept, we come to understand the four main levels of project management. For stakeholders who have low interest, low power, we require minimum effort to monitor them. That is, use the strategy of inform. Whereas for stakeholders who have low interest, high power, we need to keep them satisfied and their interest protected. That is, involve them. For people who have high interest in your project but low power to change, you must keep them always informed and consult strategies used. Whereas the key players who have high power, high interest, or influence in the project, we need to maintain good relations and manage them closely. Hence, the strategy of collaborate is advised. Let us learn about each in detail. The first level of stakeholder management is inform, which expresses minimum effort of stakeholder involvement in this project. Secondary stakeholders with lower influence but higher importance need to be kept informed of the decision that may affect them directly. It is unlikely that they will anyhow play an active role in making those decisions. However, were they to highlight a particular issue with the decision, it is likely that serious consideration will be given to refining the decision made. Next is consult. This is the way to keep stakeholders informed in the project. Since the secondary stakeholders with high influence but low importance need to be kept on board, they should be consulted in order to make or seek any opinion and input for key decisions that directly or indirectly will affect them. The third level is involve. Despite the low influence of these stakeholders with high importance, they need to be involved in all activities in the project according to their interest, since they have the power to make decisions that will significantly impact the project. As long as their interest is achieved, they are kept satisfied and they retain passive rather active interest in the project. They are well managed. The fourth is to partner or collaborate with the stakeholders who are the primary and have high influence and high importance to the project's success. As such, they should be treated as partners to increase their engagement and commitment. This can be achieved by revising and tailoring the project strategy, objectives, and outcomes if necessary to win their full support. This brings us to the end of this lecture. To summarize, we have studied the two main classification, that is internal and external stakeholder. We understood the directions of influence: upward, downward, outward, sideward, and internal and external. We also understood how to understand who is important to the project. This can be determined by the power interest matrix or importance influence matrix. By classifying who has low interest, low power, high interest, high power, high interest, low power, and low power and high interest, we can determine the strategies or levels of stakeholder management. That is, inform, involve, consult, and collaborate. Thank you.